So, here we go. Welcome to Tune In Tuesday, Chapter 2, Session 5. In the last two sessions, we've been following the developments of the prophecies in the Old Testament concerning the kingdom. So, the name of this session is The Coming Kingdom, Part 3 and Part 4. There is a lot. So far, we've learned that God made a covenant with David that his sons would occupy the throne forever. But there was a condition imposed that if they did right in his sight, they would prosper. But if they did evil, there would be consequences. Nevertheless, the throne would be retained by his sons within the family. We also learned about the consequences of evil in the king's reigns. Because of it, Solomon, his kingdom was split after his death, and the northern 10 tribes almost never measured up after that, and ultimately were carried away and dissolved. Their only remaining hope then was in the resurrection of the just, when God would gather them again. The southern kingdom lasted a little longer, but ultimately it was defeated by Babylon and carried into captivity. Some of the children and grandchildren of those believers were allowed to return to Jerusalem by the Persian king Cyrus. We will pick up in the last section of the Old Testament in a moment and review the remaining prophecies of the kingdom. But one thing is certain: there's been no mention or expectation of the church. All future hopes were pinned upon the coming of the Messiah and the millennial kingdom, in which the resurrected believers would rule, having been raised from their graves, receive spirit, having one heart, knowing God, and being priests to the Gentiles who would be subservient to them. This eschatology is all Jewish so far, correct? The church was unknown. I think that's clear. But first I need to clear up a couple common questions. The prophecy was that the throne of David would last forever. Well, is that so or not? The kingdom definitely ceased to exist after the summer of 586 BC, when Jerusalem was destroyed. The answer to this apparent contradiction is that since there was no kingdom anymore, there is no throne for a king to sit upon. Israel was no longer a kingdom. Therefore, even later, the short-lived so-called Maccabean kingdom was not actually a kingdom per se. It was a theocracy ruled by priests. The actual kingdom will not occur again until the kingdom of heaven comes to pass upon earth. And this is still future. I'll discuss Jesus' relationship to this kingdom in another session. Another question that often arises is concerning the numbering of the tribes of Israel. Jacob had 12 sons, but when Joseph rescued his family from the famine in Canaan and moved them into the fertile delta of Egypt, out of gratitude, Jacob adopted Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Remember how he was blind at that time. He crossed his hands and blessed them and gave them an inheritance. So technically, there were then 13 tribes. There's a book out named the 13th tribe. Actually, it should be the 14th tribe. But anyway, later when the law was given to Moses, the tribe of Levi was set up to be public servants and ministers. They were to own no land, but be supported by offerings giving to the tabernacle and temple. So the number of tribes owning land went back down to 12. There's a couple other counting caveats, because this seems to be normal for Jewish things. There's always complications and exceptions. When the prophet tore up Jeroboam's garment into 12 pieces and gave him 10, Levi was not counted. When he reserved 2 for Rehoboam, Levi was not counted either. Those 2 tribes were Simeon and Judah. But since the Simeonites were migrating herdsmen, they were never home. So their land ultimately was absorbed into Judah. Also during Saul's reign, they almost wiped out an entire tribe due to a terrible atrocity committed by the tribe of Benjamin. They were settled close to Judah. The rest of the Israelites attacked them and killed a significant portion of the men. And the remnant of Benjamin was very small, therefore, just north of Judah, and it was grouped with the northern 10 tribes. In the future, New Jerusalem will have 12 gates. These are described in the book of Revelation, but they were also enumerated in Ezekiel 48, in which, in Ezekiel, Levi and Joseph have 2 gates. Also in the book of Revelation, 12,000 of the 144,000 will be from the tribe of Joseph. What's the tribe of Joseph? So it actually is for Ephraim, and 12,000 will be from Levi. But the tribe of Dan won't be represented among those 144,000. Instead, Manasseh, the other son of Joseph, will have 12,000. Now, the consensus among theologians for this is that Dan had eschewed the portion of the promised land given to them near Joppa on the Mediterranean coast. And because it was populated by the Philistines, and they were supposed to defeat them and wipe them out and take the land, but Dan didn't want to do that. So they had such a small area left to them that wasn't occupied by the Philistines, that they decided to move en masse to a whole other area that was not part of what Joshua had allotted to the tribes of Israel. So they all moved to Bashan. That was an area north of Manasseh on the east side of the Jordan, above the Sea of Galilee. Another reason that Dan's not counted among the 144,000 is that Dan also forsook Judaism for idolatry, and this happened early. Since they had moved to the north end of the 10 tribes, they were exposed and more easily affected by the paganism of those lands to their north and west. And finally, when it comes to all this counting stuff, you may have heard of the quote-unquote half-tribe of Manasseh. Okay? This is not referring to the inheritance of Joseph being split in half between Ephraim and Manasseh. It is referring to Manasseh being on the half on the east side of the Jordan River and half on the west side. Okay? They were given area on both sides of the Jordan River. And the deal was that the tribes that inherited land on the east side of the Jordan River didn't have to fight for those lands, because the children of Israel had wiped out the people that were there, and so they took their land. And so the tribes of Reuben and Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh didn't have to fight for their own land. So to accommodate that, Joseph said, okay, you guys are always going to be in the vanguard of our battles, to give them a reason to fight. Otherwise, they would have been lazy and said, well, we don't have anything to fight for. See. So that's the half tribe of Manasseh. I hope that clears stuff up. So I'm about to commence my analysis on the eschatological prophecies in Daniel. This is the culmination of over 40 years of research. So I'm going to be using content from several of my classes and publications and papers. Setting the table for this are the books of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. While Daniel was finishing his career in the Persian Empire, Zerubbabel and a contingent of captives went back to Jerusalem. Don't you love that name, Zerubbabel? And when he was born, they just said, oh, that's Zerubbabel. But anyway, Zerubbabel and the contingent of captives went back to Jerusalem and began rebuilding the temple and their houses. Cyrus, the Persian king, had decreed for this to happen and had financed it. But the Samaritans did not like that, for it would diminish their influence that had been gained while Jerusalem lay in destruction. So the Samaritans first tried subterfuge for a few years, and then sent a threatening letter full of half-truths to Cambyses, the next king of Persia. And that caused them to cease building the temple. After a few more years, when the time was right, the prophets Haggai and Zechariah encouraged them to start rebuilding again. So in Zechariah chapter 2, verse 1, we read, I lifted up mine eyes again and looked, and behold, a man with a measuring line was in his hand. Then said I, where are you going? And he said to me, to measure Jerusalem, to see what is the breadth thereof and what is the length thereof. And behold, the angel that talked with me went forth, and another angel went out to meet him. And I said, run, speak to this young man, saying, Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns without walls, for the multitude of men and cattle therein. For I, saith the Lord, I will be unto her a wall of fire round about, and I will be the glory in the midst of her. Well, this is proof that the walls were not built yet, right? This is right after chapter 1, verse 7. That was in the second year of Darius I. So, take a look at Zechariah chapter 4. Chapter 4, verse 6. Then he answered and spake to me, saying, This is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, saying, Not by might, nor by power, but my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. Who art thou, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel thou shalt become a plain, and he shall bring forth the headstone, talking about the cornerstone of the second temple, thereof, with shoutings, crying, Grace, grace unto it. Moreover, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house, his hands shall also finish it. And thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts has sent me unto you. Wow. How would you like to get prophecy like that? That's great. This next prophecy has a double fulfillment. Zechariah 6:11. It was fulfilled by Jeshua, the priest, in 501 BC, and by Jesus in 2780. Zechariah 6:11. Then take silver and gold to make crowns, and set them upon the head of Joshua, the son of Josedek. In Ezra, he's called Jeshua, the high priest. And speak unto them, saying, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, Behold, the man whose name is the branch. That's Jesus' nickname. He shall grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. So this is a prophecy about Jesus building the temple, all right? Even he shall build the temple of the Lord, and he shall bear the glory, and shall sit and rule upon his throne, and he shall be a priest upon his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both. Wow. Well, when did Jesus build the temple? John chapter 2. Jesus answered and said, Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Then said the Jews, they were scratching their head, 46 years was this temple, Herod's temple, in building. He had refurbished the second temple, all right, and took him 46 years up to that point. And wilt thou rear it up in 3 days? But Jesus spake of the temple of his body. Whoa! What temple was that? Isn't that interesting? Samaria tried intrigue again to stop the temple from being built. But this time they failed, because a copy of Cyrus's decree was found in the archives. And so the construction was resumed and finished in the 6th year of Darius I. Then Ezra and a group of priests and Levites migrated back from Babylon to officiate. And they set up the 24 courses of the priests again. They did not have representatives from many of the priestly families who had died off in captivity. And so they split up the half a dozen or so families that returned, that were related to the priests, and divided them up so that there were 24 courses again. All right. So, for example, John the Baptist's father was of the course of Abia. This course was one of the ones they set up in the book of Ezra that this is talking about. During this time, the events in the book of Esther occurred, which culminated in the 12th year of Darius the First. That's who I say the husband of Esther was. After this, the Jews had great influence in the Persian court, so that in the 20th year of Darius the First, Nehemiah was granted permission to go to Jerusalem. He assumed the position of governor, and once there, he oversaw the rebuilding of the city wall. And the Samaritans tried to stop that too, and failed. The consensus among Bible historians, though, is that Nehemiah was before Ezra and Esther was after both. But that can't be so. The Samaritans, who had attempted to thwart the rebuilding of the temple, tried to assassinate Nehemiah by asking for a meeting in the temple. They wanted to corner him in the temple. What temple? Aha! The temple was rebuilt before the walls. It existed during the time of Nehemiah. Take a look at Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 10. Here it says, "Afterward I came to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Delahiah, the son of Metabiel, who was shut up. And he said, Let us meet together in the house of God within the temple." There it is. "And let us shut the doors of the temple, for they will come to slay thee in the night." So there was an attempt to assassinate him. Now, the reason we need this information about Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, is that most chronologers place Esther after Nehemiah, and they place it in the reign of Xerxes I. But that's impossible due to the age of Mordecai, given in Esther, and the high priest genealogy given in Nehemiah. I have a PDF that I published on academia.edu on this subject, and I also publish it in Way Beyond, so you'll get it. The reason it absolutely cannot be Xerxes is that Mordecai would have had to have been 120 years old during the 12th year when he became the Grand Vizier under the king who was Esther's husband. Therefore, it had to be during the reign of Darius I. The high priest genealogy confirms this because Jeshua is the high priest during Ezra, and we saw he oversaw the temple construction. His grandson, Eliashib, was priest during Nehemiah and helped rebuild the city wall. So unless they had a time machine, they have to be in that other order. This is all at variance with Bullinger's theory, as well as many encyclopedias. But the evidence speaks for itself. This information is important, for it will give the proper starting point for a span of years in Daniel that we're going to get to. And that span in Daniel, chronologers have been wrestling with it for centuries. Now, I know I've been throwing a lot of names around, but we students of the Bible have to get a basic understanding of the Old Testament. Otherwise, it all sounds like Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. If you don't know what that is, ask a Star Trek fan.
Right.
Oh. Sorry about that. We're getting closer to dealing with Daniel. But to properly apply the information given in Daniel, we have to apply the correct hermeneutic keys and be in harmony with all the other verses on the subject. When we do so, we have to realize that all the prophecies are Jewish in nature. The church was still unknown at that time. The Gentiles who will serve the Jews are not us. The church is an altogether separate group from the future believing Jews and the future unbelieving Gentiles. Another key is to understand ancient prose. One must think like an ancient person, because many errors have been introduced simply because students used modern thinking and timekeeping and culture to interpret Scripture. We must endeavor to find out what it meant to them back then. Something could be entirely logical to our modern mind, but be totally wrong. Many Jewish customs were complicated, especially timekeeping. Another rule which must not be violated, especially with prophecy, is one must keep the dispensations straight, the administrations. The Bible clearly states that there was a great secret that was kept hidden from everyone, especially Satan and his spiritual forces. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 7 and 8 talk about this. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 7. But we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, regarding the mystery, even the hidden wisdom, which God ordained before the world unto our glory. So it involves us, which none of the princes of this world knew, for had they known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. Wow. Because of this fact, absolutely positively, no prophecy of the Old Testament could contain any doctrine which is part of the great mystery. None. Absolutely none. Not knowing this one thing has caused much confusion. Yes, there may be similarities between the eschatological expectations of the church and the Jews, but they're not identical. The Jews were expecting fulfillments when the Messiah came and when the millennial kingdom was set up. We will see what effect the changes that occurred in the winds of Pentecost, what they had, in another session. Another related concept of the great mystery or secret is the role of the Jews in the age of grace since Pentecost, the age that we are now in. Again, much confusion has occurred because the people who don't know about this secret equate prophecies which explicitly are concerning the Jews, and they attribute them to the church. This error is compounded because those ignorant of the great secret are in the majority, and this seemingly tilts current eschatological theories in their favor, when actually the majority does not rule in this case. Only truth does. The current role of the Jews is revealed in Romans 11. Take a look at Romans 11, verse 25. For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles, be come in. This secret now revealed is a great key to understanding Christian eschatology, and I'll be covering more in another session. But now we are still dealing with Jewish eschatology. This secret included a period of blindness of the Jews, and it included a fullness of the Gentiles. This time period is the church age that we are now in. The Old Testament predicted that the kingdom of the Messiah would have no end. But when Jesus and John announced that the kingdom of heaven was at hand, or impending, or imminent is the word, did it actually come? I'll be addressing that. The key factor that many commentators do not realize is that the Church of Grace time period was hidden in God, and this is incontrovertible. No one, not even Jesus, knew the mystery till it was real. I believe that. The great mystery or great secret was not revealed to anyone in the Old Testament or Gospel era. It was revealed to the Apostle Paul. So the prophet David certainly could not have foreseen that even though the kingdom of heaven would have no end, it was to be temporarily interrupted. And there would be a time period also that was still secret in between in that prophecy that he gave. He didn't know about it. And this makes a big difference. For without accommodating it, any Jewish or Christian eschatology will be flawed. So, we covered Daniel's first vision in the last session. So now we go to Daniel chapter 7 for his second vision. As we read this second vision, a certain set of symbolic vocabulary will be used. In the imagery presented, beasts are kingdoms, horns are kings. The sea, as in other passages, is the evil spirit realm. This symbolism carries through the rest of the book and influences the prophecies in the book of Revelation as well. I have a document on the glossary of these things, and it's a living document. We're discovering more and more as we go, and we're utilizing the principles of biblical concurrency to see that all the prophets throughout time used the same glossary. That's exciting. Also, this I'm going to teach from Daniel incorporates research from the Hope Mini Summit that I taught in Tampa on September the 23rd, 2017. And Diane Martinez's teachings that are going to be coming up are going to illuminate more of these. So, Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and a vision of his head upon his bed. And he wrote the dreams and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. First was like a lion, had eagle's wings. I beheld the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said to it, Arise, devour my flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. And the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw, after this he needed an Alka-Seltzer. But anyway, after this I saw the night vision, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and had a great iron teeth, and it devoured and broke in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the other beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. What a headache. And behold, in this horn were the eyes like of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, that's God, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool, and his throne was like a fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands and thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. In the judgment was set, and the books were opened. I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spoke, I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him, and there was given to him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. There's the millennial kingdom. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away. His kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. Wow. So there is more of what became Jewish eschatology right there. Verse 18, but the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which is diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron and nails of brass, which devour broken pieces and stamp the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up before whom 3 fell, even that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them. Well, that's before the millennial kingdom. That's talked about in Revelation 13. Until the Ancient of Days came, that we talked about earlier, and judgment was given to him, that we read about earlier, to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Wow. See, this is more that's fulfilled in the book of Revelation. Thus said he, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of his kingdom are 10 kings that shall rise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and to think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. What does that mean? I think it's purposefully ambiguous, and we'll only realize it when it's time. But anyway, verse 27, and the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but they kept the matter in my heart. Wow, how'd you like to have that for a dream? This vision is still future and fits with the book of Revelation, chapter 13. Verse 13 and 14 are very important details. This coming is tied in with the judgment and millennial kingdom. Some of the other details of the prophecy are that the 4th kingdom will encompass the whole earth. Verse 23. He will make war against the believers. Verse 21. He will be defeated, judged, and destroyed. Verses 11 and 26. One like the Son of Man will come in the clouds, which means out of the spiritual realm. And of the Old Testament saints will be given dominion. Verse 13, 14, and 27. So that's the second vision in Daniel. The third vision, the next chapter in Daniel, contains a vision that's mixed. Part of it has already come to pass, but other elements still seem to be future. This vision is unique because it was given a name, the vision of the evening and the morning, in verse 26. That implies it has 2 parts. We now know that there's a time break in the middle, in between of this vision, between things past and things still future. So Daniel 8, verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar. Now, Belshazzar was the last king of the Babylonian Empire. He actually was a co-regent with his father, Nabonidus. So, after Nebuchadnezzar, who was 605 BC to 562, came Amel Marduk, who reigned from 562 to 560. Then the next one was Nergal-Shar-User. How'd you like to have a name like that? I dare to think what his nickname was, but anyway. 560 to 556 BC. Labshi Marduk only reigned for a portion of a year, 556 BC. Then came Nabonidus, who was Belshazzar's father, who reigned from 556 until 539, when Cyrus the Persian defeated Babylon. Belshazzar was a co-regent, the son of Nabonidus, because Nabonidus was at another site in the kingdom, and he did not like governing. So he gave all the governing job to his son. His son was the one that they had that party, and they took out the vessels that were used in the temple and were drinking with them, and then the hand wrote on the wall. Remember that? That was Belshazzar. So, and Daniel was the one who gave the explanation of the writing. But here, during the 3rd year of this co-regent, Belshazzar, Daniel saw, verse 2, I saw in a vision, it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. And I lifted up my eyes and saw, behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. Now, in our glossary, horns are kings or kingdoms. This was Media and Persia. And I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beasts might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. He was moving so fast. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. This is Alexander the Great. And he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran into him with the fury of his power. And I saw him come close to the ram, and he was moved with bitterness. Why? Well, because of the past Persian attacks on Greece. Remember Thermopylae and the 300 and all that? Okay? Moved with bitterness against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand up before him. But he cast him down to the ground and stamped on him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. And therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. Alexander the Great died in the prime of life. And for it, instead of it, came out four notable horns toward the four winds of heaven. It was split between his generals into four parts. And out of them came forth a little horn, which is the Seleucid dynasty we're going to see, and waxed great towards the south, and towards the east, and towards the pleasant land. That's the nickname for Israel. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast some down of the host, and of the stars to the ground, and stamped on them. The Seleucid dynasty spread Hellenism, Greek theology, and eliminated other pagan religions and cultures, and tried to do that with Judaism. Yea, he magnified himself, even to the prince of the host, to God Almighty. And by him, the daily sacrifice was taken away. That's what one of the Seleucid kings did in Jerusalem. And the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, desecrated the temple. We'll read about that more. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it was cast down, the truth to the ground, and it transacted business, and prospered. And then I heard one saint, that's an angel, speaking, and another saint, an angel, saying to that certain saint which spoke, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation? This is referring to the abomination of desolation that I'll tell you more about. To give both the sanctuary and the host of to be trodden underfoot. And he said to me, unto 2,300 days. Well, that is exactly 78 lunar months, alternating 29, 30-day months. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And it came to pass, when I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meeting, then behold, there stood before me an appearance of a man. And I heard the man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came nearer where I stood. When he came, I was afraid, and fell upon my face. But he said to me, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep, and my face toward the ground. But he touched me and set me straight. And he said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed the end shall be. The ram which you saw having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. So no mistake, that's what it meant. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king, Alexander. Now that being broken, whereof the four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, here's the time break, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding, dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He's going to get it from somebody, guess who? and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper in practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. This is Book of Revelation stuff. And through his policy also he shall cause the crafter to prosper in his hand, and shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. And he shall also stand up against the prince of princes. Oh, the King of Kings is who? This is future reference to Jesus, the Messiah. But he shall be broken without hand. Oh, we're going to watch that in the future. And the vision of the evening and the morning, there it is, 2 parts, which was told is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted, and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up, and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision. But none understood it. So, this prophecy was really tremendous, because it's so specific that the critics of the Bible say that some scribe edited Daniel's vision and filled in the blanks with the specific information, because it was so specific. The kings of Media and Persia, Alexander the Great, okay? And this was spoken hundreds of years before it happened. Well, that's what God can do, right? This prophecy has 2 parts with a time break in between. The first section covers the Persian Empire up through the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes, who desecrated the temple, and is the first mention in Daniel of the abomination, which occurred in the temple. I have another study on that too. One prominent feature in this first part is that it gives a time span of 2,300 days. Like I said, that's exactly 78 months. Now, when one does a comparison with the book of Maccabees that talks about this event and the time surrounding it, the time span does not fit exactly the total length of time the temple was actually desecrated. In 2 Maccabees 1, 54 and 59, Antiochus IV set up the abomination of desolation on the 15th of Chislev and sacrificed a pig on the altar in Jerusalem on the 25th of Chislev. And that would have been December the 6th, 167 BC. The temple was cleansed 3 lunar years later. Not solar years, 365 days, but 12 or 13 months, depending upon if they put in an intercalary month to help the calendar fit with the seasons. And so, anyway, the temple was cleansed 3 lunar years later, 2 Maccabees 4:52, on the 25th of Chislev, December the 16th, 164 BC. But there's more, because in the prophecy of the 2,300 days, it included the phrase trodden underfoot. History records that the temple was rededicated on the 25th of Kislev in 164, or I think it was Chislev, which was the inception of the Jewish feast of Hanukkah. If we consult Parker and Duberstein, they analyzed the Jewish calendar and gave throughout the Old Testament time, all the way through maybe 200 AD, every year of the Jewish calendar, and they analyzed and showed which years had a 13th month. All right, and that's Parker and Duberstein. You can get that on the internet. We can see that the years 170 and 167 both had intercalary months, 13 month or second Adar in them. So if we count backwards 78 months from the cleansing of the temple and the end of the abomination of desolation, it brings us to the end of the month Av, AV, which is the 5th month in 170 AD. Now, more information. Antiochus IV fought the Egyptians in the Battle of Mount Casos in early November. that same year, 170 BC. And according to Parker and Dumblestein, that would have been in the middle of the 8th month. So our 2300 days was back to the 26th of Av, all right, which is the 5th month. The month of Av is always 30 days long. And so this date would have been 80 days before that battle, which was in the 8th month. Now, I did some homework. In the orbis.stanford.edu website, there is a calculator that shows how fast ancient armies moved, whether they're on foot or horseback, or whether they were Roman legions, all right, with the whole baggage and everything that the legion took with them on ox carts and everything. A Roman legion would take about 50 days to travel 300 miles from Damascus, where they left, to the site of that battle, okay? And they would have gone via Jerusalem, because it's right on the way, at the speed of ox carts. So it's not implausible at all that the sanctuary was trodden underfoot by advanced elements from this army 30 days earlier. So that takes care of the 80-day discrepancy. And so the prophecy of being trod underfoot until the abomination of desolation was cleansed fits 2,300 days, 78 months. Antiochus certainly had been meddling with the affairs of Jerusalem before 170, throughout his entire reign. In 178, Antiochus' father, Seleucid, had attempted to plunder the temple. Then when Heliodorus, his tax collector, tried and failed. Then in 173 BC, the Tobiad faction in Jerusalem bribed Antiochus IV to depose the sitting priest, Onias III, and appoint their man, Jason, as the high priest. So he's meddling all along, right? And again, in the year 171, Menelaus ingratiated himself with Antiochus IV, and he got the high priesthood in place of Jason. Later in 170 or 169, after the Battle of Mount Caessus, Antiochus quelled a Judean revolt that had been fomented by the false rumor of his demise at that battle, and he reinstated Menelaus and plundered Jerusalem and the temple. So, because of all the corroborated historical information in all of this, I believe that the evening portion of this vision to already have happened, because it fits the 2,300 days. Now, interesting? Another term unique to Jewish eschatology is the abomination of desolation. This refers to the pagan desecration of the altar in the temple. The Jewish temple has existed in two forms. Solomon's temple, which was until 586 BC, when it was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Then the second temple was finished during the reign of the Persian king Darius I and remodeled by Herod. Then it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. There will be a third temple in the future, and that's indicated by 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4, and Revelation 11, verse 1 and 2. Bullinger, in his discussion of gnome, G-N-O-M-E, the figure of speech quotation, mentions a very important concept when it comes to the fulfillment of prophecy, and specifically cites the abomination of desolation as an example. He concludes that this prophecy is an example of something with multiple fulfillments. Isn't that interesting? Here's what he says. There's a further corroboration which will help us when the quotations are prophecies. Prophecy is an utterance from the Lord, he who was and is to come. His words, therefore, may often have a past, present, and future reference. Prophecy frequently has all three. The reference to the events at the time of its utterance. Number 2, a subsequent reference to some great crisis. And 3, a final consummation which shall fulfill and exhaust it. When a prophecy is said, therefore, to be quote unquote fulfilled, that exhausts it. In other cases, where that final fulfillment is still future, the quotation is general, quote, as it was written, or some such indefinite reference. The mistake made by most students of prophecy consists of this, that they do not bear in mind this threefold aspect of prophecy, but take one part and put it for the whole. For example, with regard to the prophecy in Daniel 11, there was a reference to Antiochus Epiphanes, now past, but this neither fulfilled nor exhausted the prophecy, which waits yet for the future revelation of one who shall fill it full. While there may be a historical reference to the course of events between, each is true as part of the general fulfillment, but neither contains the whole truth embodied in the fullness of the prophetic record. That is critical to understand. So that's why I have included his excerpts from his book on figures of speech in the handouts. And I encourage those of you who have not done so yet to examine Bullinger's work on gnome. It actually was translated from Latin from, there's another person earlier than Bullinger that wrote a book about figures of speech in Latin, which has never been translated. But Bullinger's work gives so many examples of all these different issues with prophecy that you can really get to see what the ancient people did with quotations. And I tell you, it is different than what we do with quotations. And if you treat things the way we treat quotations, you won't be correct. So that's why take the time, please, and work this handout, and then you'll understand prophecy from its true standpoint. Even though the first temple was destroyed, the term abomination was not applied to its state of destruction, because Nebuchadnezzar just destroyed the temple, but he did not desecrate it or pollute it. He was just a collector of gods. That's what he did. Brought them all back to Babylon. The prophets had prophesied that the temple would be destroyed and that there would be desolation, so it's different. Look at Leviticus, written back in the time of Moses, chapter 26. This is fascinating. Verse 27, if ye will not for all this hearken unto me, but walk contrary unto me, then I will walk contrary unto you in all fury, and I will chastise you 7 times for your sins. That could be 7 independent times, or it could be symbolic of fully or completely. And ye shall eat the flesh of your sons, and the flesh of your daughters shall you eat. That only happens when people are desperate during a siege. And I will destroy your high places, and cut down your images, and cast your carcasses upon the carcasses of your idols, and my soul shall abhor you. And I will make your cities waste, and bring your sanctuaries unto desolation, but I will not smell the savor of your sweet odors. And I will bring the land unto destruction, and your enemies which dwell therein shall be astonished at it. And I will gather you among the heathen, and I will draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste. Then shall the land enjoy her Sabbaths, as long as it lies desolate, and you in your enemy's land, even shall the land rest, and enjoy her Sabbaths. As long as it lies desolate, it shall rest, because it did not rest in your Sabbaths, when you dwell upon it. And upon them that are left alive of you, I will send a faintness into their hearts, into the lands of their enemies, and a sound of shaken leaf shall chase them, and they shall flee as fleeing from a sword, and they shall fall when none pursues. Wow. And they shall fall upon one another, as it were before a sword when none pursues, and you shall have no power to stand before your enemies. Wow. And you shall perish among the heathen, and the land of your enemies shall eat you up. And they that are left of you shall pine away in their iniquity in your enemies' lands, and also in the iniquities of their fathers shall they pine away with them. So that's what happened. Wow. Daniel 9. Daniel 9. See, one of the confusing things in all of these kings' names in Daniel and Ezra and Nehemiah is that they are throne names. They're not the same as the modern names attributed to the kings of Persia. Okay, we know them as Cyrus, Cambyses, Darius I, Xerxes, and Artaxerxes, all right? But they use those terms in those books, but they're not referring to the same people that we're referring to in modern kings lists, because the names of them, like Darius means holder of the scepter. And then Bullinger gives the other equivalents in his companion Bible. So, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by the books the number of the years, whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolation of Jerusalem. All right? This is the end of the 70-year captivity. You've heard of that? He talked about the desolations of Jerusalem. Now, the added term abomination was used in reference to pagan religion. We get examples of that in 2 Kings 23, verse 13 and verse 24. You can look those up. The Hebrew word is shikuts, and apparently is applied when the altar was purposely desecrated, as was with the case of the Seleucid king Antiochus IV, who sacrificed a pig on the altar, and that was that abomination of desolation that lasted for 3 years. So Daniel 8:13, we read this before. Another example, then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said to that certain saint which spake, how long shall the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? And he said, 2,300 days, 2,300 days. So the sanctuary be cleansed. Now, it also appears that the same kind of thing happened with Jesus when he mentioned it in the Olivet Discourse. That's Matthew 24 and Mark 13, in which it is said to occur again in the future before the Great Tribulation. Look at Matthew 24. Matthew 24, verse 15. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso reads, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee unto the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop come not down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. Woe to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flights be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath days, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. That mentions the abomination of desolation. And when you see it, you got to beat it out of town right now. Also, it's referred to in 2 Thessalonians, chapter 2, verse 3 and 4. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that's called God or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Well, that is an abomination. Daniel the prophet also referred to this in a future setting. Daniel 11:31, his arms shall stand upon his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, there it is, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that makes desolate. And then Daniel 12:11, and from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Different figure than we read before. This is the third instance of the abomination of desolation that's still in the future. So that has to be a separate fulfillment, because there's a time span that's different from Daniel 8. In Antiochus IV, it was 2,300 days. Here it's 1290, so it's a different incident. This is still in the future in the book of Revelation. Daniel also includes another term for desolation, shamem. This has two meanings. The primary meaning of shamem, according to Brown Driver Briggs, is desolation or destruction. But it also refers to one's response to seeing such utter destruction, which is amazement. Accordingly, Rotherham, in his Emphasized Bible, translates this phrase, abomination of desolation, as, quote, the horrid abomination that astounds. In other words, it's so horrid, it would blow your mind if you were a Jew. The same word, shamem, is translated astonished elsewhere in Daniel. So far we've seen that there are two occurrences of this prophesied event. The first involved Antiochus IV's desecration in the Second Temple and the altar, which ended in 164. That cleansing of the temple was commemorated by the Feast of Hanukkah. Another is still future, just before the Great Tribulation. But there appears to be a third fulfillment that we're going to see about after the break. So let's take a break. Bless you.